We are going to talk about what dietitians do in eating disorder treatment today. So, all about what our role as dietitians are in the treatment of eating disorders,
Yeah.
regardless of where you're working. That's what we're talking about. You
What
got
do
something to
we
say?
do? How do we do this? We're here to help you in the snippety snack chat blurb of dietitians. Here we go.
Yes, here we
Okay.
are. All right. So, dietitians have a really important role in treatment. And I think one of those is that we are one aspect of a very important treatment team.
Mhm.
And we have very specific knowledge related to nutrition, food science, and like mental health and behavioral health and behavior change and how all of that comes together. And so, we really kind of specialize in taking all of that information to create change for our clients with eating disorders.
I don't know about you, but I honestly think that we as dietitians are the best. Don't tell any other provider that, but I do think that we are the best because we are like the jack of all trades, right? We know the medical piece, we know the behavioral health, even though we're not outstepping our scope, but we kind of have all these multifaceted roles, which, hey, now
It makes us pretty cool. It
it
also
does.
means one of our big roles is being this sort of key collaborator, because I think we end
Mhm.
up being the provider that talks the most with the doctors and also with the therapist. And also, if there's other providers like speech or OT, like we end up kind of being this, like, I don't know, I want to call it like the anchor that does
Yeah.
all this collaboration and makes this collaboration happen.
Yep. Part of why I love our job is when I originally started my career, I was like, maybe I'll be a doctor because I love this medical stuff. And then I realized I don't want to go to school for that long, even though now some of y'all that are dietitians are having to go to school for so long. I'm so sorry. What's happening in this industry anyways, but we're addressing the physical, the mental, the psychological aspects of the eating disorder. And so it is, our role is really multi-layered. So we're going to kind of chat about that a little bit today. Oh, you can see my blurry cat. See her going around in the background? Yeah, blurry cat. So it's happening. Um,
Cute cat.
yeah, cool. So yeah, where do you want to go from here? You want to talk about
I
initial
think
assessment and
I'm gonna
plans
talk about
or?
assessments a little bit.
All
So
right.
our kind of role, I think of it from beginning to end, even though treatment is not like a linear, straight line. But initially, we're going to start off assessing clients, and dietitians can definitely have a huge role in assessing for nutritional deficiencies, eating disorder behaviors. A lot of times, our assessment is looking at like frequency of behaviors and how food is showing up in day-to-day life, as well as kind of thoughts and cognitions around food and body and movement. And we're often sharing that information with other providers as well. So really kind of digging into, kind of a physical nutrition assessment, food recall, really learning about relationship with food, family dynamics around food, and kind of putting together this picture. Assessments are my favorite, like really getting to know someone's like long-term relationship with food.
Yeah. And I think there's many ways to do this. And I think what's curious is knowing that like maybe how Gina does it, how I do it, how my group practice does it, how other dietitians do it, it all can be really different. And so I know that some dietitians send out like a nutrition questionnaire ahead of time and have clients fill this out. Or maybe if you're in treatment, there is a really kind of formalized kind of assessment that needs to be completed because of insurance and coverage and all that stuff. And some people like to fly off the seat of their pants and just come in open-ended and talk to the client, right? And it's not as formal and things aren't being as rigidly documented. So, I mean, Gina, what do you do? What's your mojo there?
I do not send a ton of questions ahead of time. I have a little bit more reservation around like having someone talk about things that could be vulnerable or triggering without support while they're alone. So I save a lot of that for in-house in the assessment. But I do have a lot of questions, and I pretty much ask the same ones to everyone.
Mhm.
I think this is making me think we need to do a whole like how to do an assessment
Yeah, we can
section,
do that.
which
Write
we
that
might need to
down.
dive into. There's an idea for
Write
next
it
time.
down.
But yeah, I have my own style, like you said, and I really like to ask a lot of questions and get into lots of nitty gritty detail and kind of go through the whole life story.
And I think it's recognizing, like, Gina, you work with a lot of trauma clients. And so really keeping that space super safe and recognizing that people are likely coming in, really needing a protection bubble around them. And so I think that is really specific to the work that you're doing. I'm not necessarily currently in my practice seeing and doing initial assessments because I'm not taking new clients, but I know for my group, we do send out a nutrition assessment, a questionnaire that is not required, but clients are able to fill out any part of that. And again, it's not necessarily assessment questions. There are parts where we're asking about behaviors, where we're asking about core beliefs and stuff like that. But a lot of it is also asking about accessibility. Like, what is your relationship with your body? And what's your lived experience? How have you grown up in this world? How safe do you feel going into doctor appointments or going into certain places in the community? What's your accessibility with movement? Do you feel like this is a tool that is accessible to you? Is your body able-bodied or what? And so this, I think, is really just like laying the groundwork for some people that want us just to know ahead of time what's happening so they don't feel like they have to come in and explain all this stuff to someone that maybe they've done a million times because we're the 10th dietitian that they're working with, or they don't know us and they don't want to tell us this information, and putting it on piece of paper or whatever feels a little bit safer. I also think it's
Something
really helpful for those newer dietitians that are like, I don't know how to do an initial session and I need some sort of framework and structure, and this keeps me organized. And I like to take notes or have this data. And I think that's okay. For, some of those seasoned dietitians, I feel like having something like that kind of breaks my mojo. And so I really like to come in open-ended and really just fly off the seat of my pants, seeing what's happening in the session and then going from there. So all strategies are totally okay.
Yeah, and something you highlighted when you were saying all those different things that you look at, it just highlighted to me as our role of dietitians being so much broader than just what do you eat
Yeah.
and let's change what you're eating, right? Or support you in that change, but actually like looking at this much broader picture. And I love this concept of like, if we can bring it back to food, it's within our scope of practice. So a lot of the things you talked about seem like they might be like, well, why are you worried about that? Or why are we thinking about that? And it's because all of these things really impact someone's relationship with food, eating disorder behaviors, and the care we're going to provide for them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So shifting it out of that and going into nutrition education and behavioral interventions. Do you want to hit on that or?
Yes. Yeah. So this is, I mean, really the bulk, I think, after that assessment, what are we doing day in and day out? Nutrition education and interventions are going to be kind of a mainstay of our work. This is going to look like dispelling myths and addressing misinformation in food, which is more prevalent now than ever with everything that's on social media and all the access people have to kind of mis and disinformation around nutrition and health. We also, as dietitians, have a lot of different tools in our back pocket, different styles of motivational interviewing or different therapeutic techniques to help with behavior change and really meeting a client where they're at to help with their maybe distorted thoughts or beliefs and really helping them shift how they relate to food and body. And I think it's just that nutrition education really is something you kind of learn to subtly weave into different parts of everything that you're doing in session. And it's not like, you came in today, here's my handout, and we're talking about this, and here's your education. It's more kind of seeing what's going on with the client and then pulling from like a kind of, I don't know, a repertoire of different things to talk about and kind of inserting as you go with what's relevant to what the client's bringing in.
Right. And so I think this is something important to recognize, is that this part of the work is really complicated and can look really different. And this is where our different styles can shine. I often think that when people ask, like, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a dietitian. And they're like, I can picture you as the person coming in the hospital. I'm like, don't eat that. Don't do that. Exercise more, right? It's like going to the dentist and being like, do you floss? Floss more. Do you brush? Brush more. Okay, thank you. Bye. Right. And so like that is not what we do. I think weaving in and out the like nutrition education is such a fun part of our job, but the nutrition counseling is really where the growth happens. It's like, how do we take this information? How do we take these interventions and present them to the client in a way that feels really accessible and doable? What stage of change are they in, and how do we really work with that client in helping them get from point A to point Z, depending on their readiness. It isn't just like, here, do it, cool, bye, right? So that is
Oh, we are so much more skilled than that. Don't put me in that narrow
are,
box. Don't
we
put me in that
are,
narrow box. Which I mean, just makes me think of like the laundry list of other things we can touch on here of like how dietitians do meal planning and really individualized plans, how we can do kind of exposure therapy and support clients in diversifying their diet or working on addressing food fears and anxieties, things like, you know, grocery shopping and planning of food. We also have a much bigger kind of process in family dynamics, working with families of loved ones, and, you know, not just working with individual clients, and really weaving in family support throughout the treatment process, and sometimes being like, you know, a parent coach as much as we are working with the individual client. And then, you know, there's also that collaboration piece we talked about. So one of our big roles is collaborating with other providers as
right.
well.
Yeah. And so we don't want to forget the part of our job, which is like, yeah, like we do talk about food. We can adjust meal plans if actually appropriate for that particular client. So there is this like multi-dynamic of doing food specific meal planning and the nutrition counseling core concept. So it just is why our role is amazing and also a lot of extra fluff. One thing I want to bring in that's really important, which is what makes like Gina and I really passionate about this, but is like bringing in that like ethical consideration and social justice into this work. It's really recognizing that the same treatment isn't accessible and safe for every single person. And so it is really important that you bring in that individualized consideration for the client's lived experience, the client's autonomy, confidentiality, and cultural sensitivity. And so it is something that I know for me, I was not taught in school, and this is the aspect of my job that I'm continuing having to do work, learn and unlearn, and make sure that I am providing that culturally sensitive and ethical care to my clients that is right based on their own lived experience. So
Yeah, so to kind of put a bow on that, one final thing that made me think of is referrals and how sometimes we aren't the best fit for a provider or for a
yeah,
client. So we may be also making referrals, or even if we are continuing to work with a client, we might be referring to other providers. So having doctors and therapists to recommend, you know,
yeah,
referrals to, or recommending the higher level of care, we might be the person who's deciding it's time. So that might be part of our role as well, as determining when someone needs a little more support.
right.
So yeah, I think that kind of
Okay, this
wraps
is a
up.
little, it is, and it's a just scraping the surface, tiny little tidbit of this information. And so TBD on a longer version of this conversation, but yeah, check out our show notes for resources and details, and we'll see you at the next snack chat.